Morning, all. Brian S. Pratt here, reading another chapter of the Morcyth of the Unsuspecting Mage. I don't know why I keep saying the Morcyth Saga. It's chapter 10 today. Recap: James has concluded business in Trindle. Went to Bern, found Myko, and then traveled south and is heading toward Cardry, where the Castle Cardry is, in the hopes of learning more about what's going on, maybe find out why he's there. And then along the way, they met up with a bard named Parolin, and they spend an evening together. And now, chapter 10. Oh, Parolin is not a major character, but he has recurring appearances throughout the series. Okay. James woke to find Parolin gone. He lay there for some time, watching the sun rise and the sky turn blue. Thoughts of the last few days played across his mind: narrow escapes, flight, and magic. Life in this new world certainly wasn't going to be mundane and boring. He couldn't make up his mind whether or not that was a good thing. Edging toward a good thing, he got Myko up and made for travel. Myko took a sizable bite of an apple, then said a moment later, "He sure left early. I guess he was in a hurry to make Cardry this evening. And don't talk with your mouth full. I can hardly understand you." "Sorry," Myko said, swallowing. "Hope we can make it there tonight, too." "I don't think we'll make it before tomorrow at the earliest. Maybe if we had another horse, we might, but not by foot." James took the reins as they exited the copse of trees. Oh yeah, thunderstorm going on right now. So hopefully I can upload this when I'm done. If not, I'll upload when I can. When a storm hits here, my internet gets very choppy, and if the thunder is really close and really bad, we unplug the router, or it'll get fried. Okay, James took the reins as they exited the copse of trees. They made their way back onto the road and headed south. Myko wasn't very happy at the prospect of walking for another 2 days, but he had little choice. The day was nice, the weather was cooperating, their spirits were high. It seemed Myko had been correct about the pursuer's unwillingness to stray too far from Bern. Pursuit was not forthcoming. As the morning progressed, the sun steadily climbed higher into the sky. The temperature rose quickly, forecasting a very hot summer day. A breeze blew out of the southwest and allayed the worst of the summer heat. James was delighted. Throughout the morning, they made good time, pressing onward with only one short rest break. The road was rather deserted. The only other souls they encountered were one lone traveler who drove a wagon drawn by a pair of mules, passing on his way north, and a couple of fast riders who overtook them on their way south. The skyline of another fair-sized town on the opposite side of the river appeared on the horizon a little after noon. An aged bridge spanned the river, allowing traffic to reach the town. They asked the traveler who had just crossed over the bridge and learned the city was named Collington. Since they had no money left after their flight from Bern, they continued past. Evening found them still on the road with no inn in sight. There was a few sizable copses of trees in which to shelter. They found a spot near the river and made camp. Being exposed to those passing by made James slightly uncomfortable. Whenever a rider rode past, James thought Lord Collarain's men had found them, but each time it was merely someone going about their business. While Myko readied the fire, James searched for a stick suitable for fishing. One tree boasted a fairly straight length of limb. Once sharpened, he carried it into the river. Twice he entered the river, and twice he emerged with a fair-sized fish impaled upon the stick's end. As day gave way to night, another campfire sprung to life some 200 feet further north on their side of the river. A short time later, another appeared across the water 50 feet or so to the south. Must be common to make camp along the river. He strained to see who was on their side of the river. The deepening dusk proved too dark to make them out. Myko nodded. Even near Bern, some would rather avoid paying for inns. "Not me," James turned back to his young companion. "I would have to be pretty desperate or short on coins to give up the comfort of a bed." Myko laughed. "I wouldn't trade a bed for the ground if given the choice either." James chuckled and returned to the fire. He and Myko spent time getting to know one another better. What was it like growing up on the streets? Myko's face lost much of its joviality as painful memories surfaced. It wasn't easy. always being hungry. The older boys would take what you had and leave you with nothing. After a while, you knew who your friends were, who you could count on to watch your back. He then grew quiet as he stared into the fire for several seconds. You also knew who to avoid. Like those boys who chase us into the sewer? Yeah. If you got on the bad side of the wrong people, you wound up dead. He grabbed the end of a small stick and poked at the coals. What about you? What's it like where you're from? Like here for the most part. What could I tell him that he would believe? People are people no matter where you go. Some are good, some bad. I suppose so. They traded tales as the night wore on. James had grown to like this lad from the streets of Barron. As he related tidbits from his past, James spoke of his parents, grandparents, Haveston, and school. Talking of home didn't elicit feelings of homesickness as it had before. Rather, they comforted him and brought him peace. When the fire burned the coals, they settled in for sleep. The night passed uneventfully. Both woke a little stiff from sleeping on the ground, but well rested. James got up and walked around, trying to work the kinks out of his back. They weren't nearly as bad as those during his first 2 nights in the world. He fervently hoped that come this evening he would be in a bed. Sleeping on the ground would never be something he enjoyed. Every time when he thought he found a comfortable position, a new rock would make itself known, forcing him to change position yet again. Michael got the horse ready while James went to the river and refilled the water bottle. He glanced around as he waited for the bottle to refill. Several people stood in the water 100 feet upriver. By the looks of it, they were doing their morning business. Revulsion overcame him as he looked at the river flowing past those people toward him and into his water bottle. Visions of dysentery ran through his mind. Disgusted, he stood up and poured out the water. Across the river, another group filled earthen jugs with the river's water. He knew it was water that could very well be carrying bacteria and waste products from the people and animals further up the river. He then realized that any and all water, all things drinkable, could originate in the same unsanitary and parasitic infested way. He remembered especially saw on the Discovery Channel about parasites and how they got into your system and took up housekeeping. Disgusted, he had to do something. Michael walked to James and asked, "Are you ready?" "Are you ready for what? Diarrhea?" "Diarrhea? What are you talking about?" "No, are you ready to get going?" "I'm not going anywhere until I can figure out how to get some clean water." Michael examined the water flowing past. "Looks clean. You can see all the way to the rocks on the bottom." In truth, the water did flow smoothly and the riverbed was clearly visible beneath. James directed the lad's attention to the people getting out of the water. They just fouled it. Then he pointed toward the people filling water bottles and jugs downstream. Those people down there are unaware of the contamination that will be making their way into drinking water. Contamination? What do you mean? His expression clearly showed his confusion. It's hard to explain. Let's just say that contamination is something that can make you sick. If you say so, Michael said uncertainly. James once again filled the bottle, then found a spot several feet away from the water's edge. He sat and placed the water bottle on the ground before him. Michael sat opposite him and waited quietly to see what he was up to. A minute or so went by before James began to cast a spell. He concentrated on the purity of the water. He had the impurities collect on the sand beside the bottle. Michael watched and was astonished when a wet spot formed on the ground. An almost minuscule lump of brownish goop formed on the wet spot. It gave off an unpleasant odor. James finished the spell. He brought the bottle to his nose and sniffed. Satisfied, he took a sip and a smile crossed his face. He handed the bottle to Michael, who hesitantly brought it to his mouth. His eyes widened. Never tasted water like that before, he took another drink. Best I ever had. I doubt if anyone has had water like this. That's the way water tastes where like where I come from. Most of the time, anyway. James took a small stick and poked the brown goop. This is what was in the water, the stuff that makes you sick. There are several ways to do this without magic, but we don't have the time or facilities to do it properly. He took the water from Michael, emptying it with a long drink. James filled the bottle once more, then sat down and purified it with his spell. Michael watched in wonder as the brown goop formed once more on the ground. Finished, he packed the bottle away and returned to the road. They headed south once more. As the day progressed, the road became ever more crowded. Long convoy-like caravans, riders, walkers, and farmers going about their daily routines. Few gave them more than a passing glance. Hours later, Michael sniffed the air and looked sidelong at James. What's that smell? It's the sea. The salty smell had grown stronger over the last hour, though they still were unable to see it. Hills had grown from the flatlands, and for the last several miles, James had expected to see the sea whenever they crested a hill. Close to midday, they topped a rise, and Cardry appeared before them. Beyond the city stretched a great expanse of ocean that extended to the horizon. Cardry was by far the largest city that James had seen since he came to this world. It stretched a mile or two on both sides of the river. On a hill a little inland from the harbor, but still within the city proper, arose a great castle. Shining white in the morning sun, it was an imposing sight. It had many towers and a great keep surrounded by a high formidable wall. Atop the highest spire of the tallest tower a flag bore the crest of the Cardry line. It fluttered in the breeze. James looked to Michael and chuckled. Michael stood with mouth open, in obvious awe of the place. He reached over and closed Michael's mouth, which snapped him back to the here and now. He looked at James and smiled, a little embarrassed. Pretty impressive, eh? They headed down the hill. I'd say. I always heard it was big, but had no idea. I always thought Barron was big, but this makes Barron look like a farming village. It's the capital. I'm sure it's also a major center of trade for the entire region. It would have to be big. Moored in the harbor were dozens of ships of varying size, many buzzing with activity as sailors and porters loaded and unloaded cargo. The outlying buildings began a good 200 yards from the outer wall. Cardry had 3 defensive walls that divided sections of the city. One encircled the castle proper and several large buildings which comprised the castle area. The second encompassed a much larger area and protected the homes and businesses of many merchants and wealthy individuals. The third was the outer wall and the primary defense for the city. Almost 2 miles in circumference, it boasted towers spaced at regular intervals. Half-held siege equipment such as catapults. Despite the awe-inspiring length of the outer wall, it still was not large enough to encompass Cardry in its entirety. Originally it may have been, but over the years buildings sprung up along the outside. Primarily comprised of poorer dwellings, many were obviously taverns and inns that catered to those in need of accommodations. The poor and slovenly outward appearance of most would have kept James away unless he was very desperate. The gate through which the road passed held 2 portals, one that was large enough to accommodate wagons and merchants, and a smaller gate for those on foot or horse. James and Michael moved to the line of people at the gate, for people. Beggars lined the road, most missing limbs, eyes, or inflicted with some other deformity. James was sad and felt bad he had to reject their pleadings for help. As the line drew closer to the gate, James noticed that, unlike Barron, the guards here were not asking questions of travelers. This allowed the line to move quickly. They took notice of everyone, however, but beyond that scrutiny, allowed all to enter unchallenged. The wall itself was about 15 feet thick. As he passed through, he discovered murder holes in the ceilings where defenders could drop rocks or oils on attackers caught inside. Once through to the city proper, the state of the buildings improved over those outside, though in James's opinion they were still on the poor side. That made sense, since closer to the castle meant a higher social standing. Michael visibly relaxed in these surroundings. As a city boy, he had been out of his element on the road, but now that he was once more within a city, he felt at home. As he walked down the street, he felt the heartbeat of the city, the ebb and flow of its life. As they made their way through the crowd and noisy streets, James observed that the majority of the buildings in the outer ring were businesses with attached living areas. Inns and taverns were most in greatest abundance closer to the gate. Some were still scattered about here and there as they moved deeper into Cardry. They continued to follow the main street until James found what he was looking for. It was a 2-story building with a sign hanging beside the door that had 3 stacks of coins sitting on a table. He recognized the symbol as identical to the one hanging outside Alexander's shop in Trindle. He went to the building and secured the host of the post. "I've got business here," he said. "You better stay here and keep an eye on our stuff till I'm done." "Okay," he said, then took a seat on the steps. James went to the door and entered. A bell announced his arrival. The interior was remarkably similar to that of Alexander's. 4 guards turned their attention his way. Not seeing him as a threat, they went back to being disinterested, though they remained aware of his actions. A man poked his head out the window in the far wall and gave a welcoming smile. The man was a spitting image of Alexander. "Good afternoon, my good sir. My name is Thelonious. How may I help you today?" James took out his letter of account from Alexander and approached the window. Are you the brother of Alexander who lives in Trindle? Why, yes, I am. Do you know him? I have. I did have the pleasure of meeting him on 2 occasions. He handed Thelonious the letter of account. When he gave me that letter, he asked me to tell you that all is well. Ah, that is kind of you to deliver his message. He scanned the letter. I assume you are here to open an account? James nodded. I also would like some coin as my trip down took all I had. Have you decided how much you will require? I was thinking perhaps 50 golds, James replied, say with 5 broken into lesser currency. Very good. I shall be right back with your coins and the papers for you to sign to set up your account. He then ducked his head back into his room and returned a short time later with a sack of coins and several papers. Now, I've had several questions asking, why does James have no money when he gets to Bern? I mean, he took 100 golds out of Alexander's, but he didn't spend that much on the way down. Well, I mean, when they were leaving Bern and people were after him, a lot of people either glossed over, didn't pay attention to the fact that when he was going for the rowboat and the 2 guys came out and were about ready to attack him, he said, how about selling it? And then he tossed them his sack of gold because, he had to gather fast. He didn't want to dicker and haggle and have to fight these 2 guys. So he tossed them as gold. Probably paid way more for that than that. And so that's how he has no coins. Yeah. James isn't very smart when it comes to money, but hopefully he'll get there. Okay. The Thelonious emptied the coins onto the counter, and together they counted them, making sure the total equaled 50 golds. Once counted and both satisfied with the count, James signed the papers. Taking the papers, Thelonious asked, is there anything else I may assist you with? As a matter of fact, there is. Could you perhaps direct me to the Inn of the Silver Bells? The Silver Bells, eh? Thelonious responded. You can find it further toward the castle, past the second wall on Long Street. However, you may wish to stay elsewhere. It is quite expensive. It caters mainly to visiting nobles and the wealthy. Could you recommend one that would be nice, but not too dear? Thelonious gestured to the right. There's one down the street called the Dancing Squirrel. It is well kept and the rooms are fairly priced. James extended his hand. Thank you. He took the hand and shook it warmly. You are welcome. Should you ever need any assistance in the future, please call again. James tucked the sack of coins inside his shirt and exited. Michael sat on the steps, idling away the time, watching people passing on the street. He turned as he heard the door open and came to his feet when James appeared. There's an inn down the street the fellow inside would say would be a good place for us to stay. Untying the horse, he led them down the street to the right. They didn't have very far to walk before James spied the inn that bore a sign with a dancing squirrel. Michael waited outside with the horse while James went inside to get a room. The door opened onto the common room, and off to the side sat a long bar. To James's surprise and amusement, he found a rather large, fat man who stood on top of the bar trying to coax a yellow cat out of the rafters. Come on, kitty, kitty, the man said to the cat. He had a bowl in his right hand and passed it under the cat to entice it down for a treat. Ahem. James cleared his throat to make his presence known. Startled, the fat man dropped the bowl. It hit the edge of the counter and fell to the floor. The sound of shattering pottery told his fate. The man turned with face red in embarrassment. He gave the cat a last look of exasperation and climbed down off the bar. How may I help you today? He asked as he approached. James looked up at the cat. I was about to ask you the same question. Oh, that damn cat. She always gets up there and then expects me to get her back down. Sometimes I think she does it just to annoy me. Cats are that way, I understand, James replied, slightly amused. Yes, well, I'll deal with her later. How can I help you? I was hoping you might have a room available for me and my companion. Thelonious down the street said this would be a good place to stay. He did he? I do have several rooms available. How long will you be staying? Perhaps a couple days, maybe longer. I also need a stall for my horse. It'll be 2 silvers a night for a room on the ground floor, an additional 2 coppers if you would prefer to be on the second floor. If your horse, for your horse, another 3 coppers a day, and that includes food and exercise. The price seemed a bit exorbitant, but then he was in the capital city, so what else could he do? I'll take the one on the second floor. He handed over 7 silvers. I'll take the room for 3 days and let you know if I need to stay longer. The man took the money and walked with James to the bar, where he opened a cupboard. Inside were rows of hooks with room keys. He removed one and handed it to James. You are in 17, top of the stairs, fourth on the left. Thank you. You're welcome, young man. I hope you enjoy your stay. I'm sure I will. As he headed to the door, he glanced back to find the man climbing back onto the bar to coax the cat down from the rafters. Chuckling, he went outside and told Michael they would stay here for a few days. They untied the horse and headed back to the stables. A large, muscular man was back by the stables, shoeing a horse. When he saw them, he said, "Just a minute." He took another nail, hammered it into the hoof, and secured the shoe in place. The man put down the hammer and inspected the shoe, making sure it was secure and even. Nodding, he let go of the hoof and turned towards James and Michael. "Yeah?" he asked in a surly voice. "Something I can help you with?" James showed him the room key. "Just need a stall for my horse." "Got one," he said as he gestured over his shoulder. "Second from the front." As if that ended the conversation, he turned back to the horse he had been shoeing. He took the other four hoof and a file from off a nearby work table and began to even out the rough edges. James led his horse into the stable and found the stall second from the front. It was clean and roomy with shelves that lined the rear wall. Once the horse had been properly cared for, they grabbed their things and exited the stable, making for the inn. The man was still shoeing the horse and paid them no mind whatsoever. They entered the inn and went upstairs, where they found room 17. They were pleased to discover 2 beds, which brought a smile to Michael's face. "No floor tonight," he said as he placed the bags on the room's small table. He then crossed over and reclined on the bed closest to the door. "I could get to like this." James took the bed closer to the window. He placed his backpack in the corner, and when he laid back on the bed, literally sank 3 inches into downy softness. "You're right, I can definitely get to like this. It's far superior to any bed I've slept in for quite a while." Before he became too comfortable to get out of bed, he got up and went to the window. They had a good view of the inner city and castle spires. The castle was very majestic and reminded James of those he had read about. He seriously doubted if there were any tours of this castle he could take. Judging by the position of the sun, he figured they had close to 2 more hours until dark. He turned to Michael. "I'm going to explore before dinner. Want to go?" But Michael had already fallen asleep. Leaving him to sleep, he headed off on his own. Down in the common room, the innkeeper sat at a table with the cat in his lap, stroking it back. "Finally got her down, I see." "She does task my patience from time to time," he said, continuing to pet the cat. "But I don't know what I'd do without her. She was my wife's, before she died. She's all I have left to remind me of her. My name is James. I am Aeneas, and this is Furball. I'm going to see some of the city before dinner, and my friend Michael should wait before I return. Could you tell him where I've gone? If I see him, I'll let him know. Thank you." Outside, the street remained fairly crowded with people scurrying about their business. One direction being as good as another, he took off to the right. He gazed at the sights and perused goods offered by the various merchants. The shops that lined the street had wares displayed on tables out front in the hopes of enticing people to buy. Most had a very loud hawker shouting the merits of whatever it was they were selling. One such place was a seller of amulets. The man assured anyone who walked by that his amulets held powerful magic. Some would ward off evil, others to cure warts, and even ones to entice the charms of the one you love. James slowed as his gaze lingered over several of the more interesting amulets on display. He soon realized his mistake as the man, seeing him exhibiting even the slightest interest in his amulets, came over and attached himself like a giant leech. Okay, this happened to me when we took a cruise to Mexico. We were in Progreso, I think it was. And when you come off the ship, of course, all the shops are there. And if you walk with eyes forward, you can hear them hollering at you, but nothing major. But if you turn and look at something, boom, they're right there, pressuring you to buy something. So this is where that came from. "Sir, you come to the right place." He moved into such a position that James was forced to stop or run into him. Holding up a small, well-worn amulet, he said, "This amulet was charmed by an ancient wizard, and it will keep evil spirits from causing you harm." "No," he said when he saw that James was not interested in that one. He held up another in the shape of a heart. "This charm will make any lady you desire fall madly in love with you." James looked closely at the amulet, thinking he could make out teeth marks indenting one edge of the heart. No, thank you. As the man extolled the virtues of yet another of his amulets, James held up his hand. The man ceased extolling its wondrous and miraculous virtues. James reached into his shirt and pulled out the medallion the creature gave him back in Trendle. Do you have one with a design like this? The man took a closer look at the medallion and shook his head. No, sir, I do not. Then he grabbed another one of his amulets that he said would bring great wealth to whoever wore it. Disappointed, he put the medallion back into his shirt. As the hawker began regaling him with the virtues of yet another, James realized he was not likely to get away without buying one. He pointed to an amulet at random. It was a plain circular one of metal bearing 3 dots which formed the point of a triangle with connecting lines. Seeing the amulet that James had pointed to, the merchant said, "That one is indeed precious. It comes from very far away and is said to have been the property of a powerful sorceress," he said with conviction as he held it up for better view. It was said that the amulet protected her from harm as long as she wore it. What happened to her? Well, her lover tricked her into taking it off and then killed her, he explained. Only 2 silvers, good sir, and you too will be protected as she had been. 5 coppers, James countered, and I'm just buying it to get away from you. Sir, the merchant exclaimed tragically, you would ruin me, starve my wife and children. Surely an amulet as powerful as this must be worth a silver and 12 coppers. Perhaps 10 coppers, James offered. Hopefully it won't turn my skin green or give me a rash. How can you possibly put a meager price on such wonderful protection, the man protested. A silver 6 coppers, and that will bring curses upon my head from my wife for having given it away. 17 coppers, James said, and I'm getting ready to walk. As he began backing away, the hawker's face turned frantic at the possible loss of sale. A silver, good sir, he pleaded. He practically screeched as he stretched his hand, holding the amulet toward him as if to keep him from leaving. Surely the protection must be worth at least a silver. He paused to think, as if to think, a silver it is then. He reached into his pocket, tossed the man the silver. The merchant snatched it so fast that the eye had a hard time seeing the move. He handed his amulet to James. With a friendly grin, the man gave a slight bow. Thank you, good sir, and may 1,000 blessings be upon you. James took the amulet and put it in the pocket. You're welcome. Okay, now whenever I read this scene with him buying an amulet, I go back to the movie The Golden Child, and Eddie Murphy is in Kathmandu, I think it is, and he's following the parrot, the green parrot, and leads him to the old man with the amulet on the blanket, and the old man tricks him into buying an amulet for $100. That always makes me laugh. But anyway, I don't know if you guys caught it or not, but the description of the amulet, the 3 dots connected, with the, yeah. So maybe you guys picked up on what that is. He hadn't taken 2 steps before the voice of the amulet seller once again joined the cacophony of his fellow merchants. Each tried to outshout the others in the hopes of luring those who passed by their stalls. From the amulet seller, he headed further into the city, where those closest to the gate were noisy and boisterous. The ones farther in were calm and quiet. These were the businesses that the people of the city used on a more regular basis. Okay, now back to the amulet. At this point, I did not have a plan for that amulet. I don't think I did. And the dots and things, because I really didn't make that up until, I think, book 2? Yeah, probably book 2. And I think I drew on this for that. But I don't believe when I wrote it, I had any plan for this amulet at the time. I thought it was just going to be a knockoff. I thought maybe I might do something with it. I don't know, but we'll see. And, well, as you know, what happens later on, it becomes important. Okay. There were chandlers, butchers, and shops for every need. These were well-established, long-time businesses known by the locals. They did not need the noise to attract attention. James enjoyed the more peaceful environment, no longer worried that pausing before something of interest would cause someone to attach himself to him like what he experienced with the amulet merchant. One shrine One sign drew his attention. It was a large pie with steam radiating off of it. Must be a bakery. Maybe they have tarts. The memory of those in Baron prompted him to enter. His stomach growled as a mouth-watering aroma wafted through the open door. "Hello," a young man said as he put down a broom and approached the counter. "What can I do for you this evening, good sir? Do you have any tarts?" "Yes, sir. My father makes the best tarts in Cardry. Our apple tarts are especially good." "Okay, I'll take 6 of those." Wanting some variety, he added, "Would you have a specialty, something that you do better than anybody else?" "Well, yes, we do, sir," the young man replied as he took apple tarts from behind the counter and placed them into a bag. "We are especially proud of our crumb cakes. It's a secret recipe handed down from father to son that's been in our family for generations. Would you like to try one?" "Sure. How big is it?" "Wait a moment and I'll show you." He set the sack of tarts on the counter and passed through a door into the back. The young man returned with a medium-sized cake, very similar to a cinnamon swirl crumb cake that his grandmother made. And I do love cinnamon swirl crumb cakes. In fact, my daughter made me a crumb cake for my birthday yesterday, for my birthday party. Yeah. Oh, it was so good. It was the top crumb was about that thick. Oh my God. I was on a sugar rush after that. Okay. Yeah. He handed over 2 silvers, and the young man gave him his change. He was glad Michael wasn't there to get on him about not haggling. He didn't like doing it unless it was with someone he didn't care for. He hated to admit it, but haggling with the amulet merchant had been a little fun. While waiting for the cake to be put in a box, James looked at all the other delectables and then glanced outside. A carriage passed by, drawn by 2 identical white horses. Intrigued, he came closer to the window to get a better look. "Oh my God," he whispered as a shiver ran up his spine. There was the same man who had yelled at them when they were being chased from Lord Collarain's estate. Lord Collarain was here in Cardry. Why? I don't know. But you know. He ducked away from the window to not be seen. Once the carriage passed, he collected his baked goods and with a quick goodbye left the bakery. The light began to fade as the sun neared the horizon. The street was not nearly as crowded as before, though many were still out and about. He walked fast but didn't run. He didn't want to attract attention. The dancing squirrel came into view ahead. He entered the common room, turned toward the stairs, and raced to the 2nd floor. He opened the door to find Michael lying on the bed, bound and gagged. He dropped his sack of tarts and rushed over to his young friend. He drew his knife to cut the bonds. Michael was trying desperately to say something through the gag. "Hang on, Michael. I'll have you free in a second." Just as he brought the knife close to cut Michael's bonds, from directly behind him he heard the creak of a floorboard, then a blow to the head, and darkness took him. So, how did Lord Collarain even arrange all this? Well, that's simple. His cronies, or his henchmen, followed them, and then and alerted him, and so he came down to deal with this himself, because obviously it would take someone of intelligence, perhaps. But he wanted, and he had business in Cardry. Though, you know, I don't go into a lot of what he was going on, because if you don't know what's going on, I think it makes things more interesting. It might drive you crazy, but if you know what's going on, a lot of times that will quiet or soften the excitement, because you know what to expect. But now you don't know what to expect, and yeah, that's just something I do, and some people like it, some people don't. And I've gotten blasted in my in reviews for that too, but it is what it is. But the ones who really enjoy my series, I guess they like it, like my style, even though it feels like a mom and pop radio station. Mom and pop radio station. When I went to Northern Alberta every summer when I was growing up, because my uncle moved up there and became a homesteader. And so I went up there every summer. My grandparents took me and my brother, and we would help him, build buildings and fence and clear land and things like that. And it was a great time. But anyway, out of Grand Prairie, Alberta, was a radio station called CFGP. And I could tell it was a mom and pop establishment, because you'd be listening to them and you'd hear a kid talking in the background, and you would hear, it was the first time I ever heard farm reports. I grew up not necessarily in the city, but city adjacent, you might say. And I never heard farm reports and crop reports. I thought that was really cool. And this station here was like nothing I'd ever heard of before. It was just a cool country station. And I think my books are like that because my books have not been edited by a professional editor. I do the best I can, and the people who help me do the best they can, but no one's been trained. But if I waited for the money to do it, have an editor, I would still be probably on the first. I'm still waiting for the Morcyth Saga to be finished. So it is what it is. I do my best, and even reading it now, I see mistakes that I'm going back and fixing. And so if I'm reading something and I pause for a second for no particular reason, it's probably because in my head I'm editing it, which I do all the time with anything I'm reading. It drives me crazy sometimes. Magazines, doesn't matter. So, yeah. CFGP out of Grand Prairie. I love that radio station. It played every genre of music. Got farm reports. Heard auctions. It was really cool. Anyway, that was chapter 10. So James got hit on the back of the head, and I try not to use that anymore because I really overdid it in the Morcyth Saga. I've gotten many reviews about that. Yeah, if you read this, it's just James walks in, gets hit, captured, escapes, repeat. And I don't think I do it too often, but I do it quite often. And yeah. Well, I'm going to get this uploaded, and I'll be back tomorrow to read chapter 11. Y'all have a good day. Bye.